I always feel that we're at the point of almost losing ourselves because we have so many non-Muslims or people hostile to Islam defining us. And yet when we define ourselves, um, and I look here and I see what you're doing, we look pretty good. And it's looking like a bright future. This topic of Black history I have somewhat mixed feelings about Black History Month. Why a month? Why not a year? Why not a decade? Why not? Because Black history is American history. But for the Muslim, Black history is actually human history. It's actually human history because we don't confine our thinking to geographical, geopolitical entities that are the constructions of often small-minded reactionary folks. We look at the entirety of humanity. And certainly, though, we understand the reason and the need for a month at least dedicated to that part of American history which has been intentionally obliterated so as to continue to disenfranchise a people and a nation.
You're listening to the Bean Pie Chronicles podcast. So kick off your leather socks and unpin your head wrap. The Bean Pie Chronicles is now on the air.
Assalamu Lama. Just want to see if you're live in the house.
Yeah. Yes, y'all. You don't stop. Hope all is well. Welcome back. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. All praise be to Allah.
Yeah. Yes. Welcome back. Hope all is well. Welcome back. This is the latest episode of BPC, the Bean Pie Chronicles. Okay, before we get into this one, let's remember to like and subscribe. Don't be a square. Like, subscribe, share. Spread the word, you heard? You know what I'm saying? Let's get this one out there. Today, we're going to pick up where we left off a little bit ago after the episode 1 of the Malcolm Paradox. Welcome to episode 2 of the Malcolm Paradox. It's been a while. I apologize for the delay, but this project has taken on some unexpected turns. This idea has been sort of well thought out in my mind, but as I start to put together the podcast, I just had to understand there's a lot of information that has to be filled in. So as the idea has been crystallizing in my mind, I realized that there's a lot of subtext and context that has to be filled in so that it all makes sense to you guys on the other end of this thing. So let's dive in. Let's get to it. Okay, so as let's get back to the fact that a key concept, what we're talking about, the Malcolm Paradox, a key concept within the Malcolm Paradox is, we have the Malcolm A, the Malcolm B, the Malcolm C. Malcolm A being the early life of Malcolm when he was Malcolm Little. Malcolm B being Malcolm under the Nation of Islam. Malcolm C being Malcolm after he left the nation, or let's say Hajj or Malcolm from Mecca. And then we have Malcolm D. Malcolm D is really the key concept in the whole Malcolm Paradox, because this is the Malcolm of the imagination, as we call him, Malcolm D. So Malcolm D is a version of Malcolm that exists in the minds of individuals, that's basically created out of the void left by his assassination. So Malcolm D is basically a figment of the imagination. So there's as many versions of Malcolm D as there are, minds and individuals that, can imagine him. So, I'm gonna state this again, and I think I've stated it from the beginning, that it's not my objective to address or challenge every version of Malcolm D that's out there. You know, you're welcome to it. My focus for the purpose of the Beanpot Chronicles is to focus on the Malcolm D of the Black American Muslim community, what I call the Beanpot community, which is a community that claims to be the actualization or the fulfillment of Malcolm's legacy. And it's my intention that by exposing the existence of Malcolm D, you know, the fictionalized version of Brother Malcolm, it's my hope that the members of my community will recognize that we dropped the ball along the way, and God willing, inshallah, we can get back to the mission at hand, as represented by Brother Malcolm. So I think it's important to, like I said, to fill in and give some context. I think it's important to start this episode off with a brief description of these communities that I'm referring to. So the term Black Muslim was first popularized to describe members of the Nation of Islam that was founded in the 1930s by Elijah Muhammad. Today, it's a blanket term for the roughly 750,000 indigenous Black Muslims in North America. However, the presence of Black Muslims in America dates back much further. History tells us that.
So we as Muslims can take things back a little bit farther than our Christian counterparts, because so many Muslims were brought here as enslaved persons. The most conservative data suggests 15 to 30% of the African men were Muslims. And I don't mean just Muslim in name, but that they understood Islam. And at least 15% of the African women, and there were very few women that were brought in. In fact, there only 500,000 Africans were brought to North America. Only 500,000. Most of the Africans went to South America and Central America. So 500,000 is actually a pretty small number. It means that we're probably all very much related to each other. We just don't know because our histories have been fractured and our lineages have been fractured.
So, you know, when we talk about the Black Muslim modern time, Islam was reintroduced, in essence, to the descendants of those enslaved Africans in the early 20th century by individuals that you may have heard of, Noble Drew Ali and the Moorish Science Temple, some less known individuals like Dulce Muhammad Ali. Then you have W.D. Farad, and which ultimately led to Elijah Muhammad. So the vast majority of Black Muslims today can trace their roots back to some Black nationalist movement from that era, from the 60s moving forward. Figures like Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, Minister Farrakhan, Imam W.D., you know, all of these individuals played a pivotal role in what we know as the Black Muslim community today. Before 1965, Islam in America was widely associated with Black Muslims and their struggle for liberation and self-determination.
I've listened to the Elijah Muhammad movement and the Black Nationalist movement, and I have heard the NAACP, and I don't feel that the NAACP's views are the way out. I feel that it would be better if it were more national rather than integrated with the views of the white man in it, for the simple reason that I think that together with our own people, more can be accomplished rather than with the white man involved in it also, because as it is, we've already been accepting too many crumbs from this man, and we've never really gotten a real loaf of bread from him.
Now, 1965 is an important date because not only was Malcolm X assassinated in 1965, 1965 marked the turning point for Islam in America. The passage of the Immigration and Naturalization Act abolished immigration quotas that had previously restricted migration from regions in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and North Africa. The impact of this policy was immediate and profound. In 1960s, for instance, the Muslim population in the U.S. was estimated in fewer than 100,000. By the 1970s, this number had grown to over 1 million, and it has continued to rise ever since. As of today, there are approximately 3.5 million in the United States, according to Pew Research Centers. This rapid growth brought a dramatic shift to not only the demographics, but also the ideology and the focus of Islam in America. Before 1965, black Muslims, primarily members of the Nation of Islam and other indigenous groups, made up the majority of the Muslim population in the U.S. However, by the late 20th century, immigrant Muslims and their descendants have become the dominant demographic, comprising nearly 2/3 of the American Muslims. So this influx of foreign Muslims didn't just alter the numbers, but it also changed the narrative. With the arrival of Muslims from countries like Pakistan, Yemen, Syria, also came a perspective of normative global Islam. This perspective emphasized concerns like Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the wars in Afghanistan, for instance, and just generally an overall emphasis on the oppression of Western policies in the Muslim world, which made sense. And for the black Muslims, the shift was dramatic. So before 1965, Islam was deeply intertwined with the struggle for black liberation. So figures like Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X framed Islam as a path to self-determination and empowerment for black Americans. But as the foreign Muslim communities established mosques and schools and organizations, the focus of American Islam began to shift. Black liberation was sidelined and replaced with a broader global Islamic agenda. Black Muslim imams were often invited overseas to study at prestigious institutions like Al-Azhar University in Egypt, or the Islamic University of Medina in Saudi Arabia. This training provided theological depth, but it also distanced them from the unique struggles of the black Americans.
I was born in Jamaica, born in a Christian family, raised a Christian, grew up in Canada, moved to Malaysia with my family, came back to Canada, studied in university in biochemistry, and became a revolutionary, Black Panther, and very much concerned about black nationalism, about African nationalism. And in the process, I accepted Islam. There were some Muslims, converts from America, in particular, brother Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick, who does a lot of lectures also. He's a graduate from Medina. So he was among those who were mixing with us young people in Toronto, concerned about black nationalism and trying to put in ideas about Islam. And one of the members, female members of our committee of our organization called the Black Youth Organization, she converted to Islam. So that started me to seriously look into Islam. I had gone to the U.S., different parts of the U.S., been mixed up with the Black Panthers there, and had come across the Black Muslims, which was Elijah Muhammad's organization, which claimed to be, Black Islam, but it was Black Mislam. In fact, when I listened to their theology, that Black people are the gods of this world, and white people were created in test tubes by Black scientists. I said, this is nonsense, So that didn't interest me to join. That caused me to seriously start to look into Islam and find out what Islam was really all about.
So to this day, you can find Black American Muslims all over the so-called Muslim world doing any and everything except for addressing the issues of Black liberation back in the States. So the vast majority of Muslims today see themselves as first and foremost members of the Muslim world, the Ummah. And their blackness is relegated to just being like superficial and of minor importance, almost sort of arbitrary. And the idea of Black nationalism is inherently distasteful and abhorrent, in that sense.
We should first see ourselves as members of the human family. And this is where I part ways with Black nationalism. Black nationalism says we are Black or we are African first. That's not true. We're human first.
We've become less of a Black American identity and really focused on this idea of a humanist. Now, most Black American Muslims are essentially humanists in essence. And in many circles, that's where Malcolm D has played an important role. This is the Malcolm of your imagination. So let's talk about the major divisions within the Black Muslim community here in America. We're going to focus on 1, the Nation of Islam, 2, the Imam WD and his community, which is a offshoot of the Nation of Islam, and then the group that I'm just going to call the unaffiliated. Each group represents a unique response to the challenges of faith, identity, and the struggle for liberation. So let's start it off with the granddaddy of them all, the NOI.
The play is sponsored, produced by a Negro religious group who call themselves the Muslims. They use a good deal of the paraphernalia of the traditional religion of Islam, but they are fervently disavowed by Orthodox Muslims. These homegrown Negro American Muslims are the most powerful of the Black supremacist groups. They now claim a membership of at least 250,000 Negroes. Their doctrine is being taught in 50 cities across the nation. Let no one underestimate the Muslims. They have their own parochial schools, like this one in Chicago, where Muslim children are taught to hate the white man. Even the clothes they wear are in sharp contrast to American dress, like these 2 Negro children going to school. Wherever they go, the Muslims withdraw from the life of the community. They have their own stores, supermarkets, barbershops, restaurants. Here you see a progressive, modern, air-conditioned Muslim department store on Chicago's South Side. Their story of hatred for the white man is carried in many Negro newspapers. Here you see their minister, Malcolm X, proudly displaying 5 of the biggest Negro papers in America. Papers published in Los Angeles, New York, Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Newark. Negro politicians, regardless of their private beliefs, listen when the leaders of the black supremacist movement speak. Here you see Manhattan Borough President Hewlin Jack shaking hands with Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the Muslims. And here is City Councilman Earl Brown addressing a Muslim rally. And shortly, you will see Elijah Muhammad, founder and spiritual leader of the group. His flock is waiting for him now. And finally, here comes their spiritual leader, Elijah Muhammad. He's actually Elijah Poole of Hawkinsville, Georgia. During World War II, Muhammad was arrested and charged with sedition and draft dodging. The Department of Justice finally dropped the charge that he had advocated defeat of the white democracies and victory for the colored Japanese. But Muhammad and his followers did serve time in the federal penitentiary for refusing to register for the draft. Here you will hear Elijah Muhammad introduced by Minister Malcolm X, the Muslims' New York leader and ambassador at large for the movement. The good news that Minister X talks about here is the coming rise of the black man and the fall of the white man.
Everyone who is here today realizes that we are now living in the fulfillment of prophecy. Right. We have come to hear and to see the greatest and the wisest and most fearless black man in America today. In the church, we used to sing the song, "Good news, the chariot is coming." Is that right or wrong? But what we must bear in mind, that what's good news to one person is bad news to another. While you sit here today, knowing that you have come to hear good news, you must realize in advance what's good news for you might be bad news for somebody else. What's good news for the sheep might be bad news for the wolf.
Okay, so the NOI, under the current leadership of Minister Louis Farrakhan, holds a complex space in the history of black Muslims in America. While their commitment to black nationalism and liberation remains central to their rhetoric, many outside of the movement dismiss them as a cult of personality. This dismissal is deeply tied to what I've referred to as the Malcolm paradox. The NOI's teachings, which include doctrines once considered radical, such as the view of the white man as the devil, are often labeled as discredited and outdated.
So this is nonsense. So
critics argue that the NOI exists today primarily to perpetuate these doctrines for the theological cohesion and benefit of its leadership, namely Minister Farrakhan. Despite this, the NOI remains really the only black Muslim movement that continues to directly address the issue of black liberation, even if it's largely rhetorical. Ironically though, this commitment to black nationalism is seen by many other black Muslims as backwards or ignorant, a perception shaped by the imaginary version of Malcolm X, Malcolm D, that they hold dear.
When you go to the Hajj, Malcolm is popular for this. You see practically everything but a green person walking down the street. You have those. I didn't realize some of those Asians, they're so small. It's a whole it's 100 of them. They all come up to your chest, my chest at least. These are so every shape, size. White people as pale as snow, black people as black as the night. You see the whole range of humanity. Black as the night with straight hair, white with curly hair. So you see on the Hajj, you see yourself, you become matured in your perception of your humanity. Now, with that mature perception of your humanity, you can go back among your black people and lift them up.
This perception is further complicated by the alleged involvement of the nation in Malcolm's assassination. A tragic chapter that has created an insurmountable barrier between the NOI and many of the other black Muslim communities. Up next, we'll talk about the Imam WD community. Okay, so when Elijah Muhammad passed away in 1975, his son, Wallace D. Muhammad, known as Imam WD, took over the helm and charted a drastically different course than his father. In 1976, he led one of the largest mass conversions in history, transitioning thousands of NOI members to Orthodox Islam.
Then the Imam lectures for about an hour on the ways of the world of Islam. The founder of the Black Muslim movement, Elijah Muhammad, died in 1975. He played a godlike role, ruling over America's Muslims with absolute authority. They now call his rule the First Resurrection. Rule passed to Elijah Muhammad's son, Wallace D. Muhammad. The Second Resurrection began with his takeover, and it promises to be a time of great change. Bay Area Muslims no longer list their race as black, for instance. They have taken the name of Bilal, a black slave who, 1,400 years ago, became their Prophet Muhammad's first minister. Becoming Bilalians is one change. I discussed others with the new Bay Area Imam, who is formerly from Pakistan, Imam Muhammad Abdullah.
Imam W.D. Muhammad rejected many of the NOI's teachings, including the separatist idea of the white man as the devil.
When this nation was torn apart by racial violence in the 1960s, many names generated fear. Mention of the black Muslims could do that, for they were perceived as a white-hating, isolated black organization. But over the years, the image of the Muslims has changed. Randy Daniels reports.
Man that was made of nothing but sin, have no good in him at all. That's the white race.
The death of Elijah Muhammad last year and the transition of power to his son Wallace have produced radical changes. The most visible difference in the Muslim movement today is the acceptance of whites and other races into the formerly all-black sect. Dorothy 13X Dorsey, a PhD in anthropology and former Roman Catholic nun, is one of the first whites to join the Muslim ranks.
Being a Muslim is to be peaceful. And in terms of being able to come into the nation of Islam, certainly I am grateful.
And there are more changes. In a major move designed to gain greater support among blacks, the Muslims' Harlem Temple has been renamed in honor of Malcolm X, the fiery Muslim minister who broke away in 1965, later dying at the hands of Muslim assassins. The Nation of Islam has long denied taking any part in the assassination.
Instead, he emphasized a multicultural, pro-Western approach, encouraging his followers to embrace their Black American identities and adopt middle-class Western values.
We have been taught in so many ways and through so many powerful forms of media that our blackness represented inferiority. Okay, so you had the angel food cake was white and the devil's food cake was black. Okay, you had the black cat, you had Black Monday, the creature from the Black Lagoon. Everything black was bad. Okay, you had Step and Fetch and all these other things. To come in contact with something that totally contradicts that 379 years of black inferiority teaching, you got to latch hold to it if you have any thought of personal survival or if you have any ego left. A person becomes a Muslim. Essentially from the declaration of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, by saying that there's nothing worthy of worship but God and that Muhammad is his last messenger or last prophet. Under Elijah Muhammad, our understanding was that you can't serve God and the devil. Okay, and so since he was the devil, we couldn't go in his army, because if we was in his army, we would be opposing what we were standing for. So we didn't. No, we wouldn't join military service. We wouldn't do anything like that. And it's not strongly advocated in the world community of Islam today, but it is an understood factor that we are American citizens. And being American citizens, you are obligated as an American citizen, and America is also obligated to you as a citizen. So whereas we vote and register to vote under Wallace D. Muhammad today, that was not one of our concerns, because the whole political system was hopeless in our concern then. But Wallace D. Muhammad, he has faith in Jimmy Carter. He says, Jimmy Carter thus far is a good president. He's made some good decisions, and many of the people in government today are showing a new type of mind. So it's our job today to support government, to support the communities, to support those things that are designed to maintain America.
Some may argue that Imam WD's approach sought liberation through assimilation, building a community that could exist within the broader American society rather than a nation, the nation within the nation that stood apart from the nation of the dominant culture. This approach had its critics, especially among those who saw assimilation as a compromise of the revolutionary ideals championed by Malcolm X and the NOI. Nevertheless, Imam W.D. Muhammad's community has evolved into one of the most significant black Muslim communities in America today. Unlike many others, they have largely avoided being swept up in the foreign Muslim influence that shifted the focus of many black Muslims away from liberation towards the global Islamic concerns, and instead focused on attaining what would commonly be recognized as American middle class values: education, good jobs, stability, good credit, things of that nature.
It is the Muslim vote that has piqued the interest of politicians. Total membership is estimated at more than 100,000. Some black leaders view a possible Muslim voter bloc as a welcomed and potent political force.
Any increased voter registration is a plus. And the fact that the Nation of Islam will bring into the political arena a disciplined group of registered voters means it will have even more impact. The Nation of Islam's influence goes beyond the realm of its direct membership. To that extent, it will have a tremendous influence. Certainly, it will discourage the notion that we experienced in 1968 of don't vote or why vote, or there's a futility in voting.
Observers of Muslim affairs see this latest political activity as a prelude to endorsements of candidates and an effort to develop some clout in the black political arena. The national impact of the Muslim vote has not been assessed, but it places Wallace Muhammad in a position to swing key state and local elections in cities with heavy Muslim populations.
Now let us get busy right here and build this new world, and I assure you we won't be ruled by any other self-government in the new world. Assalamu alaikum.
And then the last group we'll call, like I said, the unaffiliated, and that's the group that I belong to. These individuals within the, like I said, unaffiliated, this is the unofficial name. I'm just using it for context. So individuals who are not formally aligned with either the NOI, the Nation of Islam, or the Imam WD community. Many in this group have roots in one of these movements, but they left following a more traditional and orthodox form of Islam, often taught by and validated by the foreign Muslim community. Growing up in the Orthodox Sunni Muslim community in Brooklyn, New York, I saw firsthand how the foreign influence shaped these communities over the years. Our leaders, many of whom studied overseas in Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Yemen and Syria, brought back theological depth that deeply influenced our practices. However, this came at a cost. And while we established schools teaching Islamic studies, Arabic, and Quran, we also disconnected from the struggle and even the identity associated with black liberation. The focus shifted to broader concerns of the global Muslim Ummah, such as opposing the oppression in the Muslim world.
Indeed, the believers are brothers of one another, so make peace between your brother. Make peace between your brother and fear Allah. Be conscious of the rules of Allah. Fear Allah that you can receive His mercy. And Allah has already told us, no one will enter the Jannah unless it's through His mercy. Fear Allah. Make peace between your brothers. As we look here today, we see that we have brothers from every walk of life. Brothers from all the tribes. Brothers from Africa, from Arabia, from Indonesia, South America, United States of America, all over, wherever it is. And we have come here and we have understood one thing, that Rasulullah has told us that there's only one blood that flows through the veins of the Muslims. Only one. Doesn't make any difference what the pigmentation of your skin is or what your language is. It's one brotherhood. The plague that's permeated throughout the international scene today is one that's called racism. Racism, and we have it amongst ourselves. Something that we have to deal with. It's a contention. But how do we deal with it? Because it's prevalent among us as well as the Cameroon. But Allah has given us a book and the illustration of Muhammad ﷺ, something that makes all things clear. Something that gives us a perfect way to do whatever we have to do in our lives. However, it's on us to follow what Allah and His Rasul ﷺ has illustrated for us. What Allah has given us and what Rasulullah ﷺ has illustrated us. It's on us to follow it, to hear and obey. Rasulullah ﷺ has told us that not one is a believer until he loves for his brother exactly what he loves for himself. How do we treat one another? He has told us, do not envy one another. Do not inflate praises to one another. Do not hate one another. He has also told us that to boycott one another, not to leave one another, not to abandon one another. And he said, oh, you believers, be brothers one of another. Brothers again. The relationship of the brothers is stronger than the blood here, what we are talking about. This Islam is something that Allah has given us, brothers, that cause all us to come together and celebrate, rub shoulders, and try to establish Al-Islam in this earth. Surely it's on us to try to establish the deen in earth. It's not on us just to live in this life, get a good job, and get a good wife, a good family, and live good. No, this is not our position. The Muslims, brothers, are not supposed to abandon jihad. We are supposed to always be trying to institute new programs of establishing this deen. And believe it, once we begin to establish this Al-Islam in the earth and start really practicing this deen, we'll get opposition from the oppressive forces. They will come down on us, brothers. Now is the time to make fire in the masjid, brothers, because you don't have to worry about a man waiting on the way to ambush you and shoot you in your head because you were bowing down to Allah. Why we are in this position now? Because these pagans, the ones that have the Quran and the Hadith, they know well this Islam and the flavor of Islam, and that Allah has told them that this deen will prevail over every ideology, even though they passionately hate it. These pagans know this, and they're watching us. These pagans are watching us carefully and wanting to see when will we start practicing Islam. As soon as we begin to practice Islam, brothers, you can believe that the oppressive forces will be on you.
By the Western world. So there was also a disconnect between our identity as Westerners, which could go, could be, identified, goes all the way back to, the revolutionary stance, like of, not necessarily the Black Panthers, but the anti-Western imperialist movements of the 60s. For instance, the movements like the Dar al-Islam movement emerged, striving to connect with the larger Muslim world, and establishing a Dar al-Islam, abode of Islam in America, as opposed to the Darul Kuf, or abode of the disbelief, which was everyone else that wasn't Muslim. And unfortunately, ideas like that would have included black Americans who were not Muslim. So this is where this conflict and also this disconnect between black Muslims in the unaffiliated communities and the black American identity, it became more of an issue of Muslim versus non-Muslim.
From all of this we understand, this is the unity of the Muslim nation. And if we forget this, we will fall on our faces. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullah, wa tanzur nafsum ma qaddamat lighad, wattaqullah, inna Allah khabirun bima ta'malun. ولا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم أولئك هم الفاسقون. This is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we pray, when we perform our religious duty, we are following one leader, and he is also following Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. All of this shows us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never intended for the Muslims to be divided, to be fragmented, to be by themselves, according to their nation, or their family, or their culture, or their language. My brothers and sisters in Islam, there are many ayah from the sacred book that condemn division and fragmentation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he also said to us, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, inna Allah yuhibbu alladhina yuqatiluna fi sabilihi saffan ka'annahum bunyanun marsus.
And that's how you end up, disassociating with Big Mama and your family members and things of that nature. And so, but in doing so, we ultimately failed to address the unique challenges faced by black Americans. Disconnect is another facet of the Malcolm paradox. So for many unaffiliated black Muslims, Malcolm X was not just a historical figure, but he was a martyr, a shaheed in the truest sense. He's revered as a Muslim who sacrificed his life on the battlefield, almost fighting for what he believed in and fighting for what he believed to be the ultimate cause, which was the establishment of Islam.
I'd like now to call upon first Mr. Ahmed Osman, Islamic Center in Geneva, Switzerland, and the United States.
Indeed, we have known our brother Malcolm as a beloved brother, especially after his last pilgrimage to Mecca last April, in which he has come to know that all races, despite their color, despite their originality, despite their nationality, they can live in peace and harmony with each other. And since that day, he spent about 3 months in the Middle East studying the true Islam. And after he came back, he never preached any racism, he never preached any segregation, he never preached any separation. But he stood for full equality for his brothers and sisters. The highest thing that a Muslim can aspire to is to die on the battlefield and not to die on his bedside.
So black power was switched out for Ummah power. The focus shifted from black liberation to the establishment of Islam, and this Malcolm D of this community was used to support this idea. This perspective views Malcolm's death as a culmination of an existential struggle against what is considered heresy embodied in the person of Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam has doctrines, elements of their doctrines would it's seen that Malcolm rejected those elements and accepted Orthodox Islam, and essentially he paid the price for that. So these Muslims, for these Muslims, Malcolm's willingness to stand up and expose Elijah Muhammad's shortcomings and ultimately pay the price for his convictions elevates him to a status of a revolutionary hero.
I heard on the radio that Malcolm had been killed, murdered. Without thinking, I told my wife, I said, I have to call Daddy. He came to the phone. He said, Assalamu alaikum, Wallace. I said, Walaikum assalam, Daddy. I said, tomorrow is Savior's Day. I said, I want to be on the platform with you tomorrow at your Savior's Day meeting. He said, that's good, son. I said, well, you know what that means? I said, yes, sir. He said, you'll have to come before the people and tell them you were wrong. I said, yes, sir. He hung up.
I'm going to bring before you the messenger of Allah's son, Brother Wallace D. Muhammad, who wants to make a confession. Brother Wallace D.
And I said to them, Assalamu alaikum. They returned the greetings to me, very warm and powerful return of the greetings to me. Spirit of Savior's Day.
Brothers and sisters, I'm thankful to be present here today. I regret my mistake, and I pray Allah that my Father accept me, and I pray as is necessary that you also accept me and permit me back in your midst as a brother. Assalamu alaikum.
Malcolm X represents a unique Malcolm X represents a unique evolution in the revolutionary stance within the Black liberation movement. While others focus primarily on the racial and social justice, Malcolm expanded the conversation and connected the liberation of Black people to a broader spiritual struggle. By embracing Islam, he transcended the boundaries of Black nationalism and into what he saw was the ultimate struggle, the universal call to establish a society under divine guidance, in other words, Islam. One of the most significant shifts Malcolm made during his lifetime was the rejection of the NOI's doctrine that the white man is the devil. As the NOI's national spokesman, referred to in the paradox as Malcolm B. As Malcolm B, he had once been one of the loudest voices promoting the idea that the white man was a devil. However, after his transformative pilgrimage to Mecca, Malcolm C emerged. Malcolm C emerged as a man who embraced a broader vision of Islam, one that transcended race and acknowledged the universality of humanity. This evolution was pivotal. By denouncing the NOI's anti-white sentiment, Malcolm aligned himself with Orthodox Islam, which recognizes believers of all races as equal under God. This stance profoundly influenced unaffiliated Black Muslims and members of the Imam WD community alike. For many of these groups, rejecting the NOI's doctrine also meant rejecting the idea of Black nationalism. Instead, they embraced the concept of the universal Islamic Brotherhood. They embraced the focus on the Ummah, the global Ummah community, Muslim community, and solidarity with Muslims worldwide. This ideological shift put unaffiliated black Muslims in direct conflict with the NOI. The NOI maintained steadfast in its focus on black liberation and nationalism, rooted in its belief in the inherent racial struggle. On the other hand, unaffiliated Muslims prioritized the global Muslim community over the specific struggles of black Americans. The assassination of Malcolm X, carried out by members of the Nation of Islam, further solidified this divide. For many unaffiliated Muslims, Malcolm's death became a symbol of the unreconcilable differences between the two communities. The tension between these prospective communities continues to this very day. For the NOI, black liberation remains central, even if its methods and doctrines are seen as outdated by other Muslims. But for unaffiliated Muslims, the rejection of racial hierarchies and the embrace of Islamic universality often came at the expense of addressing the unique challenges faced by Black America. Malcolm's life highlights the paradox. On the one hand, he represents the possibility of transcending racial divisions through Islam, and on the other hand, his commitment to black liberation remains an integral part of his legacy. This duality makes him a powerful yet polarizing figure within the Muslim community. The unaffiliated black Muslims and members of the Imam WD community see Malcolm as proof that one can rise above the racial and nationalistic divisions. However, in doing so, they risk sidelining the specific struggles of black Americans, a cause Malcolm himself never abandoned. So what ultimately is the importance of the Malcolm paradox? By exposing Malcolm D as a fictionalized construct, we can begin to think about the real brother Malcolm, the man that fought for black liberation and died for that mission. False idols mislead communities, and Malcolm D is no exception. It is my hope that by addressing the paradox, we can return to the work Brother Malcolm X started and reclaim the mission of liberating his people. This is it for today's episode of BPC, Malcolm Paradox Part 2. Let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, stay inspired. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.